views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
This show's audio was via a Skype call.
Get fired up for Spirit Fire Radio with your hosts, Dorothy, Riddle, and Steve Kramer. Get ready to shine the light on universal spiritual principles and uncover ways that ageless wisdom can guide you in cultivating consciousness in these modern times. Bring purpose to your life through practical spirituality and add to your awareness with Spirit Fire Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Dorothy, Riddle, and Steve Kramer.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Spirit Fire Radio. It is great to be with you and great to be joined by my co-host, Dr. Dorothy Riddle. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, Steve. Glad to be with you.
Very nice to be with you again for another show on forgiveness. I'm really looking forward to this. We're going to spend 5 weeks, Dorothy, right? Because every now and again, we've got a month that has an extra week in it. So we really get to give forgiveness a go, which it seems so apropos. I want to let the listeners know, we have had this forgiveness show planned for quite some time, and it seems to be such a current topic in our culture. We're seeing so much about apologies and forgiveness and this really a dissecting of the proper ways to forgive and if it's possible to ever forget. And this whole idea of apologies we've seen in the news with so many allegations of sexual harassment and public figures. So, Dorothy, I look really forward to this today because we're going to talk about why is forgiveness difficult. And we talked about that a bit on the first and second shows in that, it's a drag. Somebody does something wrong to you and you think you've got to do all this extra work because it's really a journey. And it seems to be a journey in which we learn a lot about ourselves. We evolve a bit, but something's been done to us and yet we're doing a lot of work. So that's an interesting, it's an interesting thing, huh?
It is. And I think it's really important to be clear with our listeners that we do not subscribe to the forgive and forget philosophy, that's an oversimplification. And I even want to mention, Steve, that the language that we use is important because we talk about sexual harassment. You just mentioned that also. But that people can equate that in their minds to just, words that are yelled out or that kind of thing. And what we're really talking about is abuse in the situations that have come forward in the news. And some of the people have been extremely explicit about the very very negative effects on their lives. It's not just something that you just pass off. It's something, as you mentioned, where the person who was abused has to go through a lot of work to heal, and it doesn't seem fair sometimes, as you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. And we talked about that in last week's show quite a bit, this idea of oftentimes it starts with ourselves. We can, even when we have been trespassed upon, sometimes it's human, we sometimes think, where did I go wrong? What did I do to deserve this? Or why me? And we've got all this work to do just to get first okay and balanced and find some clarity within. And then we have to look outward and say, okay, well, what about this person? And what do I do about this situation, whether it's a workplace or whether it's a relative or even whether it's our life partner that now we've got to perhaps reconcile or at least discuss what happened. So, forgiveness is very, very complex. I think that's why the quote, to err is human, to forgive divine. Well, the road to divinity is quite the road, right, Dorothy? I mean, it is a process, and it is something that it involves many, many aspects. So we're going to talk about that on this show. Why is forgiveness difficult? And as you started right out by saying, hey, this forgive and forget, that's an oversimplification, as well as simply turning the other cheek, meaning just something has happened to you, turn another cheek and walk away. That sounds so sort of simple, could be a bit ideal, and perhaps in the long run we could suss out, what that statement is saying. But again, it can be misunderstood. So there are lots of misconceptions about forgiveness. So we're going to talk about those.
That's right. And I think it's important just to keep in mind, we talked about this the last 2 weeks, but forgiveness is really for ourselves. It's not of ourselves, it's for ourselves, because when we have been wronged, there's a lot of energy that gets tied up in that. Part of that is protective energy. If somebody is harming you, you pull in. You have to protect yourself, and it's true that lashing back out doesn't really help. It just escalates it. But that pulling in, if you can just picture that or even experience that, is, as we're talking, you pull in, and then there's this tension. There's like this knot of energy that gets tied up, and the process of forgiveness is the ability to release that and let it go. Whatever it is that you think or feel about the other party, you don't have to reconcile with them. John F. Kennedy said, "Forgive your enemies, but never forget their names." So let's just keep in mind in this whole discussion that when we talk about forgiveness, the main thing is we're wanting to find a route to heal ourselves of the harm that was done. Not to excuse. It's not about excusing the other person or saying they're there, it's okay. It's about giving the gift of forgiveness to ourselves so that we are not controlled by that abuse for the rest of our lives.
I love that you just said giving the gift to ourselves, Dorothy, because that is right there in the word forgiveness, to give for. And what we're really doing is giving ourselves space, right, to untangle that which has become tangled. And it's that contraction, right? It cuts us off. It really can cut us off from relationships, from ourselves, and really from a sense of trust. You told just that incredible story about an experience that your mom had. And listeners, if you haven't heard shows 1 and 2, they were really quite poignant and worth a listen on our archives. But that idea that of your mom in a horrible situation, and someone that would very easily have been a person that could cause that cutting off, and even for quite a period of time, she was so clear in saying, "I will not let you." Sort of diminish my capacity for joy or for safety in the future. And I think what we see, in a lot of these, in culturally, and what we're seeing in the news these days about so many perpetrators who are being called out, this idea of not forgiving and forgetting. It is really that I believe these people have come to a point where they have finally come to a sense of clarity within themselves, and they have said, "I'm stronger now." And even if it is so that there is an environment because of social media, just simply because of human evolution, that allows for them to come forward and say, this transgression happened to me, and I feel that there is a safe space now, and there wasn't until now. It's right. As John F. Kennedy says, they remember their names. So now comes the opportunity perhaps for reconciliation. So I think you made a good point, Dorothy, that, one of the biggest misconceptions about forgiveness is that it condones the behavior, that you're letting somebody off the hook. And it is not so. That is a sort of offering forgiveness does not mean similarly that could happen to you again, or that you are putting yourself back in that place and saying, okay, that's all right, I'm now open to it again. No, forgiveness is actually just simply saying that you have come to an inner balance, and then from there on deciding, what will the future look like? What will my relationships look like? Can we have a relationship, or give somebody the opportunity then to apologize? Sometimes forgiveness comes first and then the apology.
Well, and I think, you're correct. The environment is also important. And because there have been comments about, why did it take these people so long to come forward? They're just making it up now. I just want to share with our listeners, an incident from my own life, which to me puts the whole historical context in perspective. When I was a young professor, I was also working in the college counseling center, and a young woman came in on a Monday morning. I mean, she looked dreadful, just distraught, and she had been gang raped at a fraternity party over the weekend, and she had tried to report it unsuccessfully. So I went to the dean of students to report on her behalf. And the response that I got was, boys will be boys.
Wow.
And the dean refused to take any action. And so it is true that the environment, and this is great, that the environment has shifted in terms of whether or not women will be believed, but it has not shifted enough to make sure that the behaviors don't happen again. And I think one of the things that makes one of the misconceptions about forgiveness is that the process, even if it's only internal and we don't say anything externally to the party, it's not easy and it takes time. It does not happen quickly. It's not a matter that you are harmed and you just turn around on a dime and say, well, I forgive. Because the harm, it creates a wound that has to be dealt with. And that does take time.
And it takes courage. It takes courage to come forward. And what is remarkable about so many of these women and men who are coming forward is they seem very present. They seem as though they have done the work, found the courage, and the clarity is there to speak of these, trespasses. And that does take time. I just want to tuck in here. And one of the women said, and I thought it was poignant, but it was so powerful. She said, "This will no longer have power over me. This will no longer control me because I am saying it publicly." Mm-hmm. Yes, it is really, really about power. And I want to talk about that when we come back, because certainly these figures that have been in the news lately, we see that power is really is a theme here, and disempowerment. We're going to go to a break, and we'll continue this conversation when we get back.
Stay juicy. Tune in to Your Juicy Love with me, Una Drake, co-hosting monthly with Dr. Pat, and every second Monday at 12 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio. My show, Your Juicy Love, helps you find the dynamic, life-affirming love you've always wanted. Transform your relationships and bring peace, joy, and juicy, juicy love to planet Earth. For more information, visit unadrake.com.
Tune into the wisdom of your soul for guidance on living a joyful life. On Soul Wisdom Radio, Wendy will provide inspiration to raise your vibration and connect with your higher self and guides. Learn how to balance your ego and to progress spiritually on Soul Wisdom Radio with Wendy Rose Williams. Visit wendyrosewilliams.com or Transformation Talk Radio to learn more about a healing session with Wendy and her events and publications.
Now you can be a part of one of the most powerful programs to help create a more joyful, loving, abundant, and peaceful world. Every day at 12 noon in any time zone, join millions of other people around the world to spend a few minutes in joy, love, and gratitude. Brought to you by Robert Schoenfeld, host of the Art of Powerful Living Radio. Together, we can raise the vibration of the planet. For more information, visit globalmomentofjoy.com.
The Janice Underwood Show, helping you create the life you want, not the life you tolerate. Tune in each Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio as Janice delves into the Life Creator System and the next step in your spiritual evolution. Janice Underwood is gifted at helping spiritually minded people shift their mindsets to unleash the Creator within. Our souls wish to wake us up. Those of us listening hear the call. Do you? For more information, visit janiceunderwood.com.
What is a brilliant culture, and how do we create them? Why are they important? Claudette Rowley has created a breakthrough 5-step process to help you align your culture with your business strategy for exceptional results. Looking for a culture that drives organizational excellence? Listen to Cultural Brilliance Radio, the second and fourth Friday of each month at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern on Transformation Talk Radio. To learn more or work with Claudette, visit culturalbrilliance.com.
Be you plus live your purpose equals joy. That's the motto of Unstuck Joy with Vicki Todd. Vicki believes you were born with gifts that are meant to make the world brighter. Each show will feature an art visioning journal prompt to help you create your way to soul clarity. If you're ready to get unstuck and create more joy, this show is for you.
Tune in the first and third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information, visit VickiWorldArt.com.
Welcome back to Spirit Fire Radio. Before we continue our very poignant discussion on forgiveness, Dorothy and I would like to tell you a bit about our organizations that are in collaboration to bring you Spirit Fire Radio. Dorothy, would you like to start?
Yes. This is a conscious collaboration between the School for Esoteric Studies, of which I'm a part, and Spirit Fire, of which Steve is a part. And the School for Esoteric Studies provides esoteric discipleship training for those who have a spiritual practice and they want to deepen that to be in service to the world and to the common good. You can find out more about the school at esotericstudies.net. But I just want to mention that this collaboration came about in part because the school took a decision a couple of years ago consciously to collaborate with other like-minded organizations. All too often we tend to isolate or compete with each other, and we decided that we wanted to find other organizations who wanted to work together on a project, and Spirit Fire Radio is one of the outcomes, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Steve and Spirit Fire on behalf of the School for Esoteric Studies. And again, our website is esotericstudies.net.
Thank you. And wonderful website, listeners. I'm always telling people, Dorothy, to check out that website. It is just so full of so much wisdom and inspiring words. Spirit Fire is an educational nonprofit, and we are focused on educating people about the importance of consciousness and integrating awareness and spirituality into your everyday life. We do that through our own meditation practice called the Practice of Living Awareness. We've got a retreat center in Western Massachusetts in snowy New England this morning, and we hope you'll visit us, try our meditation practice, visit us for a retreat. We've got a New Year's retreat coming up, which is wildly popular. Anybody who wants to set their intention for 2018 through meditation and contemplation, come visit us. Check everything out we do at spiritfire.com. Wonderful, Dorothy. So one thing I want to jump right back in because I find it interesting and actually very inspiring. You know, we've talked about Hope. I mentioned it all the time. That was one of my favorite shows we did way back in, I think it was March. But I find it very optimistic what's going. I am filled with optimism, rather, with what's been going on. You know, even that you said, you told the story about when you were a professor and somebody coming to you and then you reporting an incident, a horrible incident, and the response was boys will be boys. I find that even men, for instance, that I don't want to be put in a group of those boys. I don't want to be lumped in a group of saying that behavior is indicative of my gender because I don't believe it to be so. I am very conscious of, I try to be very conscious of harm that I may, cause to another. I've never punched anybody in my life. I've never hit anybody or any lashed out. And so I'm just getting to, when I hear, boys will be boys, I think we're getting to a point of clarity where even men are rising up and saying to other men, hey, you've got to be accountable. This can't happen. I mean, I know we're a long way from there, but I think you're going to see that the tides are really going to turn. When you see something like what happened to Kevin Spacey, where, this accusation comes out and within 2 days, one of the top shows on cable television, House of Cards, is canceled. There's a movie coming out by, Ridley Scott, one of the best directors of our time, and they're literally taking him out of the film and it's released in 3 weeks or something like that. They're getting new actors. I mean, when you see these like really intense moves, it is really going to set a marker and a precedent for those, it is no joke. I mean, granted, at the same time, we see, political race in Alabama, and we see somebody that, by all means, we could believe has done some pretty shameful things, and we still see the system sort of covering that up in really bizarro ways. But at the same time, what I find is happening is it's all coming to light, and people are discerning. We did that show on discernment, and I just find that there's a very clear light, and there's this process of discernment and of really looking at people's words, at looking at their actions, and even those then who will either side with somebody or not side with somebody. Sometimes I feel it's just a big media circus, but other times I really feel that there is great good that will come out of it because we're becoming very clear. What was your intention? Where is your moral compass, right? Dorothy, you mentioned moral compass quite a bit. And yes. I think we're starting to sort of, at least we're trying to right the compass some. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think there still is a lot of work to be done on the underlying power inequity between the genders, which is what supports this kind of behavior. And unfortunately, we have the women who had the courage to come forward and speak out in terms of President Trump's behavior. Those women have not been honored, have not been listened to, and so we're in an interesting transitional period. I'm not quite as hopeful as you, but I would like to be as hopeful as you, Steve.
Well, we really seem to be just picking it apart, putting it under a magnifying glass in ways I have never seen before, and it just seems that it's really refining our capacity to understand forgiveness and apologies. For instance, in the news is that Louis C.K., who is, if those of you who don't know who he is, he's a comedian and he's very popular. He's got one of the best touring shows around. He's got all kinds of TV shows and HBO shows, lots of stuff in the making that's ready to come out now, and a bunch of women have come forward and said that they were the victims of abuse, and he made this apology that everybody was sort of touting as it's on the road to the right kind of apology, in that, he basically said, he named the women who were harmed, and he said, I did it. The stories are true. And he wrote this apology and gave it to the New York Times. So I just also find it interesting, Dorothy, that all of this is in the public eye. We all really can take it in, and I feel that's pretty incredible. We're all, if we choose to, it's like we've got school. It's like going to the classroom. There was a very interesting article on Quartz, which is a blog, and they went through his entire apology, and they green markered things they thought were good and red markered things they thought were bad. Because here's this apology that everybody's saying is, oh, we're moving in the right direction, and they're saying not so fast. This apology is actually quite self-centered. Just if anybody wants to do it, just do a web search or a Google search for Quartz and Louis C.K. It's very, very interesting blog post. But they go through, and you basically realize that in this whole apology, so many times it all comes back to himself. He says he's sorry, but in the end, it's all about me. He says that they point out that he says, almost 4 or 5 times he brings it back that he's very popular, he's very well known, he's very respected in his field. And in the end, you realize that this guy is a megalomaniac. This guy has got a seriously big ego. And when you really dissect the apology, they've crossed out everything that comes back to him, that it's about me and it's about how it affected him, and boy, when they edit it down, it comes down to about 5 sentences, the whole apology, which was a whole page long. And when you read the way they've rewritten it, it is so succinct and so beautiful. And you realize he says at one point something like, I have been remorseful, instead of basically just saying, I'm sorry. He never really comes out, and you realize that there's subtle nuances in that people in these positions they've got access to, just like we think the president has written every speech he's ever given. No, he's got script writers, and you realize that there's a lot of shifting and through this apology. So it's a really interesting way of just looking at the ways in which we can forgive. So words are very important, but in this he mentions the people that have crossed him, and that's important, and actually saying I've done it. But boy, saying I'm sorry can be a really difficult thing, huh?
It can be, and there's this tendency that we have as humans to justify or defend our behavior even while we're saying that we're sorry, or blame the victim. Say basically, you made me do it. If you hadn't done this, or making excuses or downplaying the consequences of actions when it's the person who has been abused is the only one that can assess the impact and articulate what the consequences were for them. So I think we, just on an interpersonal basis, we have a lot to learn about how that apology process goes. But I'd like to take us back, if we have a few minutes, Steve, to some of the barriers, the misconceptions and barriers, because when you have been harmed by someone, you have to figure out what you're going to do with that pain and that wound that has occurred. And you have to decide, an apology may help, but you have to decide, I think, independent of that. You decide based on recognizing, that we're all human, which does not excuse it at all, but just means that these things do happen. And then you have to decide if you are ready to let it go. And there are things that can make it more difficult. If if you're afraid that the person will just keep doing the same behavior over and over again, or if it seems like they don't really see that there was any problem in what they did, then you can feel like if you forgive, you make yourself more vulnerable, as opposed to recognizing that the process of releasing that energy can make you stronger. It's a very complicated process, actually.
Well, and often the people who have done harm to you, it's probably not the first time they've done it, to be honest. And that idea that they've done nothing wrong can really, no one wants to feel like the victim, and no one wants to feel like they've done something wrong. But oftentimes perpetrators and repeat offenders, they're so good at it that it makes you feel like, you've got to, one of the barriers is just, you're just not there in really assessing the full situation, right? And realizing that you did nothing wrong.
That's right. But also, I think there can be a way in which the anger and the feeling victimized is energizing, right? And we can have a fear that if we let that type of energy go, that we will be left feeling kind of weak.
Yeah, it becomes protection.
Yeah. So the main, I guess one of the main points that I keep coming back to is this process, the process of forgiveness, is critical in terms of our own self-healing, and it is difficult and takes time. It's not something that just happens immediately, unless we're in a position to be proactive. And that's what I was describing with my mother, where when she was dragged off by the rapist, she immediately began saying, I will not allow this action by you to lose, to create in me a loss of joy, a loss of trust, a loss of being open. And she just steadfastly maintained that. But most of us aren't in that awareness at the time when we're being harmed.
Right, because the harm is actually to take away our power, and that is a very powerful statement. And we always say energy follows thought, right? And she was able to create these very powerful thought forms, which almost removed herself from the event and saw herself and her thoughts as actually, as creating her reality and not this situation. So it really does become about understanding that, even for ourselves in the future, that our mind is very important.
Right. And I think the other thing, just as I reflect on that incident, which had quite an impact on me when she shared it with me, she wasn't saying that what he was doing was okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. What she was affirming was her own strength, her own connection, her own wholeness, and that she was not going to allow that to be damaged or taken away from her.
Yes. Well, we're at a break, Dorothy. We're going to continue our conversation as soon as we get back after these words. Mm-hmm.
Winning at the game of money. Lynn Brown is now offering Full Spectrum Finance, a progressive 12-month program that will help you to navigate through the mechanics of financial expansion. Finally, a financial planner who looks at the full spectrum of money and abundance. Engage you in the mental, physical, and energetic aspects of finance. This is Full Spectrum Finance. Are you ready to get into it? For more information, go to fullspectrumfinance.com.
To see your life from an angel's perspective, book a personal consultation with Claire Candy Huff, angelic walk-in angel Ariel at Angel Healing House. Candy provides intuitive counseling, Reiki, and angel readings in person in Los Angeles or nationally and internationally via phone or Skype. She will channel the practical tools you need to transform your life. Call now 831-277-3716 or visit angelhealinghouse.com.
Did you know that all of the shows on the Transformation Radio Network are available as podcasts to stream or download?
Really?
Check us out. Go to transformationradio.fm. We have business shows, spiritual shows, energy healing shows, and pretty much everything in between. Something for everyone, guaranteed to inspire, educate, and transform. We are transforming the world, one listener at a time.
Integrate spirituality into your everyday lives on Universe Soul Heart Radio. Tune in each month on Transformation Talk Radio as Kathleen Johnson explores the concept of sensible spirituality, keeping you grounded, connected, and centered on the path to wholeness. Kathleen has dedicated her life to facilitating holistic healing and wholeness in others. Listen to Universe Soul Heart Radio and learn how to flourish, grow, and impact all we do on planet Earth. For more information, go to universesoulheart.net.
What if your body and mind were the compasses to the secrets, mysteries, and magic of life? Glenna Rice, co-host of The Questionable Parent, is inviting you to access all that is possible. Glenna is a 10-year certified veteran Access Consciousness facilitator who offers an amazing variety of life-changing classes and workshops. Work with Glenna from anywhere, with teleclasses and workshops all over the globe. To learn more and see Glenna's current schedule of events, classes, and workshops, visit glennarice.com.
Choose the new earth on the Cornelia Stephanie Show. Tune in each week on Transformation Talk Radio as Cornelia takes listeners on an odyssey of higher consciousness to inspire, educate, and empower. Cornelia guides people on the path of self-healing, peace, and liberation. The Cornelia Stephanie Show is your catalyst for anchoring heaven on earth on a global scale. For more information, go to corneliastephanie.com.
Welcome back to Spirit Fire Radio. We are now halfway through, Dorothy, our month-long discussion on forgiveness. We're going to spend 5 weeks talking about forgiveness. We're on week 3, halfway through. You mentioned again the incident of your mom, and we've been talking quite a bit about equality of the sexes, and so often it is transgressions involved with sexual. We hear that about sexual harassment and sexual abuse, and it really comes down to power. I find that these situations, and it was so beautiful to hear that your mom, in a very horrible situation, was able to use the power of her mind to say, this is happening to me, this experience is happening right now, but it will not rob me of my capacity to experience joy or to trust in the future, and that you will not take that power away from me. We hear that often, and we've even said so many times that sort of Viktor Frankl quote that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it and our thoughts about it in the long run, which is really about reconciling within ourselves. But boy, what you see time and time again, and goodness, do you just see it constantly with our president? Because when you're talking about people in power, often people in power have moved to power because they have actually jockeyed for it, and they have actually put other people down. Now, are we moving to a world that would hope to see that we're in the age of Aquarius? We're moving to the round table where everybody is powerful in and of their own right, and together we form a very powerful group. But right, we're at the dawning of that age, and we're getting out of this idea of duality of the leader and the disciple, which is a sign of the Piscean age. But with that, I think it's this whole idea of those in power, these megalomaniacs, these narcissists who have really aced this disempowerment of people. And we see it, I just think of of Trump sort of really wanting to control the media and therefore mocking, a handicapped reporter, wanting to get in on Clinton, so sort of mocking her when she was at her worst, when she was really sick and really down. And I mean, these politicians have got to, that it's like a whole year of campaigning. Who wouldn't break down? And I remember just some of the words he said about her when she was sick were just nauseating. But it's this idea of being more powerful. So, it just feels like narcissism is on the rise, but it's on the rise, I hope, here's me, the ultimate optimist, right? So that we can take a really clean, hard look at it and figure it out, and therefore see the damage it does and not allow this in the future. But, we're talking about barriers to forgiveness. And oftentimes when you've been crossed or hurt by a narcissist, it's not easy because you're often met with force. The minute you try to reconcile, they will not say they're sorry. They will not even admit anything was done. And if they do, they'll use it as a way to bring more attention to themselves, which does not allow for any kind of, union. I mean, forgiveness is all about forgiving, right? It's all about creating relationship again. And they will often still even use an apology to get to the top and leave you beneath. So it can be really complicated when you are, when you're involved with narcissists. We've had more than one retreat here in the past year that was all about narcissists, learning to get beyond the narcissist. We do all kinds of retreats here at Spirit Fire, and they're packed. They're full. Narcissists are everywhere. Megalomaniacs. Social media helps that, and it takes awareness to forgive. And often narcissists and megalomaniacs, boy, do they have a distorted perception, not only of reality, but certainly of themselves. So, it really does get complicated.
Yes. And what's interesting is the distance that the narcissist creates by not being available to actually be in communication, in an equal power energy exchange. And I'd like to cycle us back to the apology part, because I think that there's some really important points here in terms of what is and is not possible. You were mentioning before about the apology that had problems with it. I experienced just in this last week a more extreme form where I was on a flight. I was sitting in first class. I drew up a difficulty to the attention of the lead flight attendant. Not that he could do anything about it, but what I asked was that he report it on up the line. And he immediately got defensive. His voice went up, and it was all about me, 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 me. He actually made the situation infinitely worse. And I kept trying to coach him, in terms of all he needed to say was, I'm really sorry that this is happening. I'm sorry that there's nothing that we can do while the flight is in process. Yes, I will take it up the line. That would have been fine. But instead, it was this very aggressive assertion of himself that created the problem. And Steve, I'd like to share with our listeners a situation that was quite different from that, which I think helps to highlight the critical components of apology that you were talking about before. I was in a Crown Plaza hotel in New Zealand a couple of months ago, and I was in a situation where I was having difficulty walking, and I asked if I could use the wheelchair of the hotel, and they said sure. And in fact, they took me up to the room on the 5th floor, and they said that I could use the wheelchair the whole time. So they knew that I had difficulty. They knew that I actually had their wheelchair. And I was there on my own the next afternoon when the fire alarm went off. And of course, as often happens in this situation, the phone system was cut out. the elevators were locked, and my only choice was to walk down 5 flights of stairs and ultimately get around to the front of the hotel. Once the fire department had left, I asked to speak to the manager, and I said to her that I was surprised that no one came to help me, because they would know that they had somebody who had a mobility issue on the 5th floor. And her first response was to thank me for bringing it to her attention and apologize for what I had gone through, and said that she would raise it with her management team. And then later that day, we were passing through the lobby on our way back from a meal, and she called me over. She said, I want to thank you again. I want to let you know what we've done about it. And she outlined the steps that they were going to take. And she said, again, I'm really sorry that you had to experience this, and I want to give you a voucher for a free breakfast, tomorrow morning. It was the key parts to me of that were not only that she acknowledged to me that I had been through a difficult experience, and she didn't just say that she was sorry, but she told me in detail what she was going to do in order to make sure that this never happened again. And I think that that's a critical piece, and that goes back to that feeling that, someone who is an abuser or is an offender, maybe this is something that they've done before, and maybe it's, you don't have a whole lot of confidence that it's not going to happen again in the future. So her saying that and taking that action and then letting me know the consequences really helped. It actually dissipated any negative feeling I had about having gone through that, what was physically a very painful experience.
And she also empowered you straight away from the very beginning, which is thank you for letting us know that. You are now the one in a position of power because you have informed them of something they didn't know or they weren't aware of. So those are two very wonderful examples. We're going to go to a break, and when we get back, I just want to pick those apart a little bit because I think there's quite a bit of material there. There's quite a bit of to talk about in compare and contrast in those two. So let's do that. We'll be right back.
The Knowledge Book, currently studied in 39 countries and 15 languages around the world, accelerates our evolution, takes us out of depression, offers universal truth, protects us, and makes us stronger, both spiritually and physically. So if you are interested in the Knowledge Book, visit usa.theknowledgebook.net and tune in to the Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Amber Teal, founder of The Healthy Edge, is bringing you the hit show Healthy Edge Radio, living with power, passion, and purpose. Amber provides the support and tools necessary for you to finally release the weight and emotions that are hidden beneath the weight. Tune in each month on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information on how you can take the next step with Amber, visit getthehealthyedge.com.
Isn't it time to put your health first, to give yourself the gift of whole body wellness? What if embracing unconditional love and self-care was the first step to wellness? Could you honor that for yourself? My name is Audrey Michelle, host of Rewired Life Radio and the author of Rewired Life, A Journey to Untangle Chronic Pain and Endometriosis. In my book, I share how I healed from 17 years of chronic pain and disease. Get your signed copy at audreymichelle.com/book, spelled MICHEL.com/book.
Tune in to the Psychic Professors Show, The Voices of Spirit Radio, with international medium and spirit artist Dr. Susan Barnes on Transformation Talk Radio, featuring a variety of spiritual topics such as psychic art, spiritualism, EVP, psychic development, and mediumship. This hit call-in show provides listeners with breakthrough wisdom to enliven and enlighten their lives. Visit spiritartgallery.net.
Tune in each Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on Transformation Talk Radio.
The Truth is Funny. Shift Happens with Colette Marie Steffen is excited to welcome Karen Benton as a monthly guest host. Tune in on the third Wednesday of each month at 8 a.m. Pacific Time to regain confidence and trust in your capacity to create change in your life, your health, your family, and your well-being. Karen Benton is a mother, nurse practitioner, certified body talk practitioner, Franklin Method instructor, and owner of Limitless Living LLC. For more information about Karen, visit KarenBenton.com.
Wow. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. This is Talk Radio to Thrive By. I'm telling you, I got to pinch myself some days because when each of us gets called to do something that we so not thought was in our wheelhouse to do for a purpose that's so much greater than us, we get to show up and shine.
If you would like to show up and shine on the Dr. Pat Show as a co-host or sponsor, send us an email to inspire@thedrpatshow.com.
Welcome back, listeners, to Spirit Fire Radio. We're going to wrap up this show before we do that, I just want to talk a bit about those two really wonderful examples, Dorothy, that you mentioned on a plane and in a hotel. You know, the service industry, right? We learned so much. I personally was in the service industry for so long and running a retreat center and running a nonprofit. Goodness, it's every level of service from the highest to the lowest. So I really, I understand both of those situations so well. And listeners, just Dorothy and I talked I appreciate, Dorothy, that we're talking so much in these shows. I appreciated that you sort of abbreviated this story on the plane, but just to let listeners know that, this was a mobility thing. So, you were in first class and, anybody who is, especially somebody who's got the responsibility to be waiting on people in first class, you really should understand that sometimes there are people that really, it's not just, it was about mobility and really to be insensitive to that is almost, putting salt on the wound, right? And you can hear in that you said it was all about him right away, this idea of just sort of, well, I can't do anything about that. Like, in other words, don't look to me. It's not my fault. It's not as if he's not responsible for your service or responsible. He's not representing the airline, right? And it goes to show, in this instance, for me, it's so much about ego. And then in the contrast with the hotel, where straight away the individual said to you, thank you for pointing that out, and I really appreciate that, and I'm sorry for what this has caused you. If you feel into it right away, the energy goes to your heart. You can sense that there's empathy, there's compassion, there's care, and goodness gracious, the reason forgiveness is a part of the spiritual path and to forgive is to divine is because we've got to make that move away from the ego, from the self, about it always being about ourselves, this default. Number one, to fear, right? And contraction. The steward was fearful that he was going to get in trouble. He was going to have to go out on a limb. He did something wrong. You were going to yell at him. So right away, it becomes all about him, which is the ego, which is it gets us in trouble. And when you feel into the second scenario, you sense the heart. And you sense this care, compassion, and that move from selfishness to selflessness is such an important aspect of the spiritual path. So there's so much we can learn in this idea of forgiveness. There's so much we can learn in this idea of receiving and giving in terms of apologies, in terms of taking responsibility. We talk about responsibility quite a bit, huh? On the spiritual path. So I just really appreciate those examples, and I think they really do illustrate that forgiveness it's a divine act, wouldn't you say?
Well, what's interesting, Steve, as I reflect on the two of them, the flight attendant may have been nervous and anxious, but his behavior has led to my reporting him to the airline. So he actually brought down on himself, I think,
sure.
What he was trying to avoid. And by being confrontational, I had to work hard to let go of, how of what happened. And what happened at the hotel was actually physically more compromising. In other words, the physical pain from it was harder. But the way in which the manager handled it, I came out of there, as you said, feeling empowered. I feel very positively. I also reported, but my report was very positive in that instance.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thanking the manager for handling it that way, because I've come out of that feeling really good, really good. Yes. And it's interesting because the physical impact on me was much more negative in the second instance, but the whole thing resolved in a way that was very healing and positive.
That's a very cool observation. Thank you, Dorothy. Because it just shows, this was a beautiful you can forgive, you can forgive the Crowne Plaza and you will go there again,
Yep.
There has been a reconciliation and you have a strong relationship still, and perhaps an even better one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Beautiful. Well, listen, listeners, next week we're going to talk about strengthening our ability to forgive. So how can we be ready? How can we get there? How can we get to this place? How can we do the work that's necessary to move toward forgiveness on our show next week? Dorothy, it's been great fun as always.
For me too, Steve.
All right. Listeners, if you want to listen to archive shows, we've got almost a whole year's worth of shows. You can go to spiritfireradio.com and click on archives, or search for Spirit Fire Radio on Transformation Talk Radio's website. Dorothy, we'll be back again next week.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
Bye, listeners.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Fire Radio. Tune in each Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern for your weekly guide to purposeful living and practical spirituality. Join hosts Steve Kramer and Dorothy Riddle as they shine the light on universal spiritual principles and uncover ways that ageless wisdom can guide you in cultivating consciousness in your everyday life. Add to your awareness with Spirit Fire Radio. To learn more, visit spiritfireradio.com.